Okay. Justin, here you go. That's not working either, my dear. I don't know why.
Guys, please mute yourself when you join.
Oh, that's the noise that's coming. Okay, I can make host. Host, yes, I can make you a host. Okay. Do you want to change the host? Yes. Okay, I just made you a host.
All right, okay. I'm gonna add the others and you as co-hosts then.
Okay, sure, sure.
Anmol, are you there? Anmol? Shantini, Anmol, are you guys
Oh,
there?
say Anthony, hello.
Hey,
Hello,
hi,
hello.
yeah, I'm there. Hello,
Okay,
Joe.
Hi, how are you, darling? Hello, hello. Saksham, Aryan, Anushka, Shayan. Oh,
okay, I guess we can begin now, guys. What do you think? Shantini, Anmol, Joe, should we start? We have
yeah,
around
whatever
80
you guys think
we have
is
around
best.
80 participants right now.
Yeah, it's
And I guess
85. Okay, I'm showing 79. We have more? Oh, I see.
we also have
79.
our speaker is already here with us.
Okay, okay. All right. Well, hi everyone. My name is Joanne, and I am delighted to be here with all my lovely chapter leads from Codecademy, co-hosting this event for all of you. So tonight is day 5, and this is Intro to React. And my name is Joanne, and I head up the Shanghai Codecademy chapter. It's a blockchain focused chapter. So basically, our events are technical and non technical in nature, and we dive into everything related to blockchain. So if that's something you're interested, you're welcome to join us. So for tonight, we have our guest speaker, the Budget Malik, and he is a junior software developer at Black Spectro. So welcome, the Budget. Hi.
Hello, Joe. I am happy to be a part of this event. It's amazing.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay, so tonight we'll have just a few housekeeping notes. We'll have our chat is going to be moderated by Jocelyn, Amol, and Sayantani. So if you see them and if you have any questions or anything, you can direct it to them. We do have a lot of resources and whatnot that we'll send to you afterwards. And yeah, we wish you all a great time. So thanks again for joining us. The budget, please take it away.
Thank you, Joe. So, guys, let's tell me when my screen is visible. Is my screen is visible now?
Yes, yes, we
Yeah.
can see it.
So, guys, my name is Devik Malik. I am currently working as a junior software engineer at a startup named Spectrum. So, what are the technologies that I mainly used in my work? Is mainly React and Vue. Most of the time, I use Vue. Some of the times, I need to use React also. So this is a short intro of mine. Now let's get started. So the contents that we are going to discuss today is, first, there was a thing that I need to discuss, that what is the difference between a library and a framework. Then there are front-end technologies apart from React. What are the technologies that are available? Then we are going to start with the intro to React, and then how we can create a start with React, how to create a simple project, and then we are going to create a component, how to create a simple React component, and then we are going to go to some concepts like props and how to use them. So let's get started. So first of all, we need to understand one thing, is what is a library and what is a framework. Why I'm going to discuss about that, because when we are going to discuss about this React, Angular, Vue, this type of framework, this type of technologies, some of them are libraries and some of them are frameworks. So if we know the basics of them, so it will be very helpful for us. So first of all, what is a library? So in short, you can think of it, library is simply some of the functions. We have some of the functions, some objects and modules, and we are basically, they are always less, they have less dependencies compared to frameworks. And the main difference between a library and framework is, a framework is itself an application. So basically what you are doing is, you are using one application to create another application, that is simply a framework. And a library is simply some of the functions we have, some of the objects we have, and there are always less dependencies
ಅದಕ್ಕೆಲ್ಲ
than
ಇದಾರೆ,
a
4
framework.
ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದಿದೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ.
Hello?
ಶಬ್ದವಿಲ್ಲ.
Please mute yourself. Otherwise, I'll have to mute the entire participant list. Guys,
Everyone, please mute yourself. Thank you. Don't forget.
I'm so sorry, Dimjit. Just give me a minute. I'm gonna
Okay, sure.
mute them. All right. Yes. You can carry on, Dimjit. Sorry.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So basically, this is the main difference between a library and a framework. So, and another thing is, you can think of this like that framework is like bigger in size, and libraries are comparatively smaller than the size. That is why React is also more popular than other frameworks. So after this basic difference, there are more technical differences between library and framework. I am just start with the basics, because as we are just started with JavaScript, so we don't have much knowledge. So that's the basic difference between library and framework. Now, before starting with React, I just want to give a brief about that. React is not only the React is not only the single one which is popular. There are other frameworks also. So if you are searching for the most popular front-end technologies, if you search on that, you get 3 technologies. One is a React, another one is a Vue, and another is Angular. So I just want to give a brief about both of 3 of them. So React is basically developed by Facebook, and it was initially released in 2013. And first of all, Facebook started using React in their own products like Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. And then later, new other companies like Microsoft and other companies are also adapting React, and now it's in boom. And another thing is Vue.js. So Vue is the youngest member of all of them. It is simply it is developed by a single person at the start. It is developed by a Google employee named Ivan New, and it's mostly open source framework. And then another one we have Angular. So it is developed by Google, and it is first released in 2010, and it is used TypeScript. So if I am just give a basic intro, so Vue has one great thing other than React and Angular, that it doesn't backed by any tech giants. Like React is backed by Facebook and Angular is backed by Google, but Vue is not backed by anyone. And the main difference between both of them is 3 of them is React is a library, so it is always lightweight thing, and Vue is a framework, and Angular is also a framework. So you can think of it, React is very easy to integrate with any other project. That's all one thing. And in the case of Angular, it was a little bit hard for beginners, because you are not able to write JavaScript in Angular. You have to write TypeScript. You have to learn first TypeScript, and then you can start with Angular. So React is one of the best thing to learn at the start if you're starting front-end development right now. So now let's start with React. So what is React? So if you go to the reactjs.org, this is the official website of React. So if you go there, you can find in the intro of React, there are 3 things that React is always doing. That React is declarative, then another one is it's a component based, another thing is it's learn once, write anywhere in nature. And now what this technical mumbo jumbo means, I am just going to discuss about it. So first thing is declarative. So what is declarative? So at first we need to understand why we need to use something like a React or Vue or Angular, because we are good with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but why we can go to something like a more complex than like a library or framework? The main reason of them is, like, one thing, if you search on the web, you find SPA, that is a single page applications. That is the main reason why React, Angular, and Vue, they are more popular. And then why in the React you find many of the advantages in React, but the main thing which React also does is it's a declarative in nature. So what is the meaning of the declarative? So previously in the web, what is happening, that if you are making a single website like in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and when you want to just change any single component, that is in React you are going to learn about states tomorrow, but I'm not going to dig deeper of the states. But what is declarative means, like, think of it like your messenger. So whenever you use like Facebook in web, if the any new message comes, then you find that that the messenger logo on the top of Facebook has that one message that is showing up. So what it does, it simply change the state of that particular icon or that particular component. In React we are calling them a component. So it is simply updating that component. It does not reload the whole page, but it is simply updating that single component. You can think of it like that. Then another thing is component based. So it is the most the main reason why we are going to use technologies like React, because it's component based. So what is component based? You can think of it like a function. So why we write a function? Sometimes we write function to write less code. So like think about it like if you are making a card, or if you are making a card. So what we are going to do, if to write that card you have to write 10 lines of code. Okay, now if you want to generate another card, what you have to do, you have to need to write another 10 lines of code. And if you want to generate like 5 cards, if you then you need to write 5 into 10 times. That is the code that you need to write. But in component based, what we are going to do, in simple words I can tell, is it's like a function. So what I am going to do, I am write all the HTML, take it inside a function, and basically calling that function each and every time. So it helps to reduce the amount of code that we are going to write. That is one thing that React has to offer, that it's component based in nature. Another thing is learn once, write anywhere in nature. So what is this learn once, write anywhere? So when you are just started with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and you build some of the web applications, and if you make some big applications, then you think that if I am going to start learning React, then I have to shift my whole application to React. But that's not fact. You can do one thing, that if you want just some part of your application you need to make to React, and other applications are going to in simple HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you can do that. So that is one thing, that if you are building, you can modular some part of it in React, and you can stay other parts in HTML, CSS, JavaScript. That is one thing. Another, there was an advantage in React, that is, if you heard the name, that is a React Native. So what is React Native? React Native is also a library which is used to develop apps. And React, if you want to get started with React Native, so React Native uses most of the code of React. So if you learn React, then later you can also develop mobile applications as well. So that is another advantage of learning React. So this is what is React in short. Now let's get started with React. So what you have to do at first, you have to install something, that is create React app. So another thing, we can the dependencies that we need in our system to get started with React. One is a Node.js. So when you are install Node, you get npm inside it. So this is the basic requirement to get started with React, that you need to install Node in your system at first. So then you need to write something like npm I create React app. Basically I is means install. So what we are write npm install create React app, or you can write I in short. Then we are going to create a project, something like this npx create React app, and then whatever the app name you are going to use, and then we are running our first project. So let's get started. I'm going to open the code editor and get started with it. One second, guys. Is my terminal is visible now?
Yeah, it is visible.
Okay. So we are going to create. So for at first, what you have to do, you have to install Node, and then you have to install create React app. So how we do that? You can use npm I create React app. But if you like, I am currently using a Linux-based operating system. If you are doing that, you have to use sudo at first. If you are using Windows, you can go to something like open an administrator mode, and then you can start with that. So I have done that. So what you have to do, you have to use something known as npx, and then after npx you have to use something like create react app, and after that you have to write the project, that name of the project, whatever the project that you want to build. In this time you need to use think about some of the conventions, like basically when all time you're using. One is never use caps for the project name. Always try to use small case letter. If you use two words, you can use dash to distinguish them. So like if I am going to do something like my app, so I can use dash in place. If I don't want, I don't need to use that. So like, and run that command. When you run that command, it is basically generating a boilerplate code for you. So using that boilerplate code, you can just edit that code and you can get started with React. So you can use something like online code editors as well. So like there was many code editors, online code editors earlier, you can use them. But I don't think it's a good idea to just start it with online code editor, because the original development work that you are going to do in any of your project or any of your organization, that is you are using your local system. So it's always great to set up your local system and start building projects in it. So let's wait for some time. So you can read these things also. So it's basically generating a boilerplate code for you, and after that it's now done. So it takes some time at first to generate. So you can, there was a command like cd. So you can go to cd and then my app. And as I have installed VS Code, I'm using VS Code as my default code editor. So if
Devjit, you're on mute. Can you just check?
hello.
Yeah, it's better now. And if it is done by any of the participants, I would really warn you, please do not create any disruptions in the session. If you do not wish to listen, kindly leave, but please do not interrupt in between. Sorry, Devjit, please continue.
Okay, sure. So when you run that command in npx create react app, and after that you have to just give your project name. And when you give that, it will generate a boilerplate code for you. And after generating that boilerplate code, there are different commands for. So like if you want to start your project, you can write npm start, then npm run build to build the project. We don't need to learn all of them right now. We are just go to that cd. Cd is basically for change directory. So I am currently in, if you see that, I'm currently in this folder React events, and within that React events, I have created another.
Devjit, I'm so sorry, you were on mute again.
Someone, it shows me that the host is muted. There was a pop-up coming in my Zoom.
My apologies. That was my fault. I'm so sorry about that. That was an error.
No worries,
Sorry.
no worries.
So currently, so if I am in React events folder, so when I am going to like cd, and this is the folder that the project I am created, the name of the project is my app. So if I'm going to change directory to my app, so I am basically go deeper into the tree for folder structure. So I am currently in my app, and when I write code dot, it will basically open this direct folder, that is my app, in my VS Code. So if you see my VS Code now, it will open my project. So is my VS Code is visible?
Yes, Devjit.
Okay. So first of all, so this is the project that is generated after writing that command. Now we are going to understand each and everything just in a brief. So at first there was a readme.md that is generated. So it is basically create a basic documentation for your project, like what are the available scripts, what is so when you push your code into GitHub, you can find this into your readme.md. So in my VS Code I have an extension, so I can show you how it looks. So it looks something like that. So this is the readme that is going to generate it. Then we have something like a package.json. So what is this package.json? So earlier remember that I tell about what is a library. So the library has some dependencies. So there were, you can find there was a name, which is the name of the project, the version that that we are going to use in your project, that is currently in 0.1.0. There was a private and there was a dependency. That is the main thing. So to when I say that you can run your React project with any of your existing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript project. So basically, you need to install these three things. So this is the main three things that are needed. So React, React DOM, and React script that are needed to run any React project. Then you can find the scripts. So the scripts that are going to use to run your project. So you like when I want to run my project. So there was a command that is React script start, and it's a bigger command. So we want something shorter like that. So if we are writing like npm and start, then it start our project. Then npm can build, will build our project. Then there are some of the things like productions and something. You don't need to go deeper into that. You just need to understand that you are not going to touch this file a lot at start. Then we have something like package log.json. So you can think of like it is the abbreviation of package.json. So in package.json we are just writing things in shorter version, and it's a longer version of package.json. You can think of this like that. Then we have a git ignore file. So don't try to touch it, and mainly this line, never touch it. There is a node module. This is the most dangerous thing in Node.js. So if you are going to delete that and you are going to push your code into GitHub, it will push your whole node modules there, and this is a nightmare for you. So don't try to change anything here also. Then we have, so it is basically git ignore is a file which when you push your code into GitHub, so whatever files or folder that are mentioned here, they are not going to push into GitHub. That is a simple thing. That is why it's a git ignore. It is ignoring the git commands. Then we have a node modules. So at starting, don't touch that. This folder is the main folder. If you delete something or if you add something, there was some of the consequences that you have to face. So don't touch it right now. So we are going to, then we have a public folder. So in the public folder, we have things like index.html. So let's start after. So let's run the project at first. So what I show that there was a command like npm start. So go into the project and run npm start. Let's wait for that. So this is the basic boilerplate that is create React that is generating. So we can edit that. I can show you that how to edit that and what are the different things. So there was a favicon, which is a React favicon that is used here. So if you have started with HTML, you know what is a favicon. Favicon is shown in the top. Then we have these different logos of React. All of these are logos. Then there was a manifest file. We don't need to bother about that. And there was a robots.txt. And the main thing that we need, that is index.html. What is index.html? So we know at any project. So one thing that you also need to remember that web only understand HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So whatever you are writing React or you are writing Angular or you are writing Vue, web doesn't understand that. So we need someone like a compiler to convert all of the code that we are writing in React, Vue or Angular, to convert it to a basic HTML and CSS. So we always need a basic HTML file, which is going to link with all of the React code that we are going to write. So there was you can see there was a doc type HTML, basically it's the HTML5, then all the meta tags, link tags, There is a title that is a React tab. So if you change that, like if you change that, this thing is changed. So basically, I'm changing the title. And the main thing here is you need to understand this thing. This is a deep ID root. So you maybe think that there was no HTML there. So how this code is going to, this thing is going to generate it. So there was one thing that is React does. So we have a div with an ID of root. So if you are no basic DOM manipulation, you can do one thing. You can create an HTML file. You can give a div with an ID of root or any of the ID or any of the class. And what you can do, you can using JavaScript to insert HTML code in that. And what in React we are basically doing that thing. We are using JavaScript and basically targeting this div and insert all of our code inside this div. So this div is very important. So we need that div. So this is the index.html. Then we have, this is the main folder where we are going to work most of our time. It is a source folder. In the source we have things like different folders, different files. We have app.css. This is the CSS that you see here. So there was a transform there. So that is why this thing is spinning. The O is spinning. In the app.js, this is what I say earlier, that a component. This is a component. So app is simply a component. The whole app. Then there was a test. This file is basically for testing purposes. So like when you write your code, you want to test your code, but at the starting, if you don't want that, you can delete that also. No problem in that. Then we have like index.css. This is the main. So this is the main. This is the index.css file, which is attached with this JavaScript file. So this is the index.js. This is the main entry point where we are going to start all of our development work. Then there was a logo.spg, this and this file. So you can think of like it's a many files that it is going to generate. So it's hard, but it doesn't. If you want, hello, hello.
Yes, Devjit.
Is there any problem?
No, not at all. Please go on.
Okay, sure. So let's start. For starting, what you can do, I'm going to do. I'm starting with a very basic. So I'm going to delete all the things here, like delete all of them, and just okay. I guess main folder is going to. Okay, so in source folder, so I am going to delete the things that we don't need right now. So now we have, there are some of the errors. So one of the great thing about using React is that when you do some code changes here, it will reflect there. When you save that, it will reflect there also. So in the index we are going to delete all the code here. We are going to delete all the code here, and I'm going to show you how to create a basic component. So first of all, we are going to, what I say earlier, that we need basically two things. One is a React and one is a React DOM to create any React project. Get started with any React project. So what I am going to do, I am going to write import React from React. Then I am going to import React DOM from React DOM. Now, React DOM is like DOM manipulation in JavaScript. So what it does, it will, what I say earlier, that we are basically targeting this this div with that ID of root and using JavaScript to insert all of our React code in between them. So like I'm going to write here all the code. So how we can do that? So React DOM has a function known as render. So this function is going to take two arguments. First of all, what component do you want to render, and another thing is where you want to render. So the first thing is where the component that you want to render. Another thing is where you want to render. So I am going to import that app. So I just want to render this app component. Now another thing, how we call a function. We call a function like that, but in React, when we call a component, we call a component like what we use in HTML. There is a brackets and angular brackets. So the app, and you have to end this. So it shows sometimes that error that if you don't close that. So so you have to just open and write like that. So this is the component. Another thing that say good practice is try to write the component file name all in caps and the component name also in caps. So I'm basically import that app, which is capital A, and whatever file that I am using, that is also in capital A. So always try to do that. Now what I say earlier, that I am basically targeting that root div. So I'm using simple JavaScript document dot get element by ID. And what is the ID of that element? We saw earlier, that is root. So there was a root. So root. So save that. Now also it shows some error, because why? Because we are not defined that app. This app is empty. So we have to create that app component. So how to create that app component? So we are like that. You have to like in every component, just because most of the times we are going to use React. So try always importing React at first in all the files, but we don't need React DOM, because we just need React DOM only in index.js. So we don't need React DOM in any other file. So in the app.js, what we are going to do, we are going to import React from React. And now what I say earlier, that I am basically creating a simple function and call that function each and every time. So we're going to do that. So I am just using function, and this function name is app. Because why? Because we are using this app here. This is the name of the function. So the function app, and we are going to define that function. So this is the structure that you have to remember, and this is structure for every React component that you are going to build. So then this function is going to return something, and what it's going to return is inside a div. So another thing you need to remember. So in JavaScript or in anything, that you cannot return more than one HTML element. So what we are going to do, if we want to import, want to render many things, so we are just group them into a single div. If you are not doing that, what you can see, I'll show you. If you create another div, like this, show me some error that JSX expression must have one parent element. So we need to create one parent, and that parent is going to be div in our case. Okay. In the div, I'm going to write some HTML. So here you can write in HTML like hello world. Okay. Now, but still the code is not working. Why? Because if in JavaScript there was a statement, one is the input and one is the export. If you want to use anything outside of this file, then you have to export that thing. So I am going to use like export, and if you are exporting more than, like there was a function named app and then there was another function, if you want to export more than one thing, then we are going to use export that whole thing. But as we are going to use just export one app, so we are going to use the default keyword. So export default app, and we are just going to save that. Okay, there was something wrong, I guess. Okay. So sometimes this live reloading not works. So like in my system, there was many times that it doesn't work. So you have to restart that whole project again. So you can use Control C to kill the terminal and then again start. So you can see that I am writing hello world and it shows here. So if I changing that like hello world, so it changes that. This is how our live reloading works. So this is your first component. So how we can create a component? So recap that. First you have to import React from React, and then you have to create a function. Because what I said earlier, that we are basically grouping many code into one part. This is one of the reason why we are using a component. So we are basically creating a function, and this function have to return something. And what it's going to return? It's return a simple HTML. This HTML in that HTML you just only able to return one thing. So you need to wrap them using one div, and inside that you can write any HTML code. So like in the H2, so you can write another H2 and this is like.
Devjit, there's a question in the chat.
Okay.
Someone's asking, can they use Node daemon with React?
Yes, they can use that, but we are not using that because that we don't need to install nodemon in case of that. Because in nodemon, what we are going to do, we are basically install nodemon also. So that doesn't create any problem here. So you just need to write npm start and let the project start. In case of nodemon, what we are going to do, we are going to like nodemon and then there was index.js. So you have to basically, if you want to do that, you can do that. What you have to do, have to go this start script and you have to edit that. Nodemon.
Okay, I hope Vedansh that answers your question. Thank
So
you,
for
Devjit.
any case, if you want to configure your project in a different way, you just have to go into the package.json and edit that. There were different things. If you just learn that how where I need to update that, you can do that. Okay. So if I'm going to write like hello John and then save that, it will show me that component. So and another thing that if you install in your system that very helpful, if you install something like React DevTools Chrome. So if you're using Chrome, so there was a extension known as a React DevTool. So if you install that in your system, because when we are inspect any of our page in any of the web page, we are basically getting the HTML and CSS there. We don't get any React. So if you want to see the React, what are the components there, all of the things, then you can install this thing. This is by official Facebook. You can just add into your Chrome. So like I have added this into my Chrome, and if you hover on that, you can get that React Tools had access on this site. So if we inspect that, so you can find that a basic HTML, you cannot get any of the React code here. But if I am going into this components, and this is the React tools, you can get, if you can click on that component, you can find who render that component, where that component is present, what are the props that are present, you can find them. So it's like the Chrome dev tools, but you can use that for if you're using React. So this is our first component. So how we're going to create our component? First we are importing React, then we are going to create a function, and the name of the function, try to use in all caps. It's a good practice. Then you have to return the HTML, basically the HTML, and you basically need to export that function. And how we are going to import that? You are in other file or whatever file you are going to use that, you need to import that component, and then like it is in index, we are going to use that render. I'm going to show you another component, like how we can create a component. In another generic component that we are going to create each time. So another thing that one good practice that we are always using is in the app. So app is like an entry point. So what we are going to do, we are creating in the source, we are creating a folder known as a components. This is not necessary, but this is a good practice if you can do that. So this is I am creating a folder in name components, and in that folder I am going to create my first component. So like I am going to create a component like name.js. So you can see another thing that sometimes if you search on web, there was some of the people are using .jsx syntax, like not .js, like it's something, I mean, like .jsx. You can do that also, but I'm always going to use the .js. I think it's much easier or much better than .jsx. So this is the name.js. It is a component that I'm going to build. So how we are going to build that component? So I have to first come first.
Before you begin with that, there are two doubts in the chat. Would you like to take them now or towards the end?
Towards the end, I think it's better.
Okay, all right, all right. So, it's Saksham and Shogik. We will solve your doubts towards the end. Yes, Devjit, you can carry on.
Okay, thank you. So I am basically importing React from React. Then we are going to create our name function, like function. What is the name of the function? That is a name. And what this name function going to return is your name. Basically, if you want your name to be returned. So like, let's say h2 John Doe. So if we are started learning web, this is one of the most popular people in web. So all of the time you are going to use name like John Doe and Jane Doe many times. So the export default and the name of the component that is name. Okay. So this is the component that we are going to do. Another thing. So if you just export, you just want to return one thing. Like here I am going to do what I am returning two things, two HTML tags, basically what you can say. But here, as I am returning just one thing, so it will just delete that div. You don't need to use that div. But if you, so it perfectly works fine. But if you want to return multiple things, like after that h2, if you have something more tag, first John Doe, and then I have h3 and it has a h property as a user 20. So now this div, you need to use that div. If you are not using that div, it shows even error, because I said earlier that you always need to have one parent element. So that's why. Now we need to import this name we want to import that name component into this app component. How we can do that? We are importing this name from dot slash. So what dot slash does? It shows me the current directory, and then it's inside the components, and then it's inside the name. So you have to basically give the relative path of that file. Okay. And now I want to call that name component here. How I can call that? I can use the Angular braces, and then this. So you can see here the code that I have written in the name component, I can start using it into the app component. Okay. So now the benefit of using component, what I say also earlier, that you can do. So if you like think of it like if you want to paste this thing 10 times. So if you just write that code, you have to write 10 into 2, that is a 20 times this code. But as I am using component, so the benefit of that is I am just going to use that all this component 3 times or 4 times, and the code is automatically generated. That is the benefit of using frameworks like React or Angular or Vue. So if you can go into the components, you can find in the React Dev tools, there was an app. This is the parent component, and inside that there was a child component, many child components. There is a name child component. There was another name child component. Then all the child components. So you can see that. Now, the next thing is is it really helpful? Because what I am thinking that if I'm going to call this thing each time, then I want something to change these names and age. So like what I can say is simply like when I call a function, I can pass a parameter. So how I can change this text or age when I call that thing? So there was something. So the best way to think about the component is always think about it like a function. So in functions we have parameters, in components we also have parameters, and these parameters are known as props. So we are they are known as props. So in React we call the function as components, and we call the parameters as props. Okay. Now how we can use props? So there are so many ways we can use that props. So the way that React, if you go to the React.js work, they're suggesting is you can create thing like a props, pass a thing known as a props, and what you can do, you can it's simply an object, and whatever props dot, if you are writing a props dot name, it will simply insert that name key into that props object. If you write the props dot age, it will simply insert that age key into the props object. So like if you are writing something like, and another thing, so if you want to uh, this is simply a JavaScript code, but after return whatever I write, this is simply an HTML code. So if you want to write JavaScript inside that HTML, you need to, if in React you can use something like this curly braces. So I want to write JavaScript here. So what I used to tell earlier, that I have to use like props and then dot and that name. What it does, it will basically take that name key and insert that into a props object thing. Things of like that. It's an object, and when I write that, it will insert in simply that name key. So this is not how actually React works. I am just tell this for the sake of understanding. So in the age, I want the props dot age. Okay. When I save that, I can find the name and ages are gone. Now the fun part begins. So in the I'm calling that name component. So in HTML we have attributes, like in image, when we are using the image tag img tag, we have a attribute name source src, alt alt attribute. In components we also have them. So what are the name of the, so what are the parameters that I'm going to pass? It is the name and age. These are now here as an attribute. So if I'm going to use like name is equal to John Doe, and the age is going to be 80. You can save that, saving that. You can see that the name is going to change and the age is also changed. So now I can call this function or component, I can say. So like and do this age is going to be 50. So this is simply, think of it like the attributes. Whatever you learned earlier in HTML, that is how I can use an image, how can I in a anchor tag, a tag, we have attributes like href. Simply you have to just call this whatever the props that we are going to use, name, the age, and just call them. So if you don't call anyone, then it's not rendered that props. So I'm going to use them. And there is no constraint, like you cannot pass the same prop to another component. You can do that. I also show you that. So now all the components are, so like you can change the values of the components. So if you want something be static for each and every one, so you can also do that. So you can use like so these, you want this text to be same for each and every one, so you can do that also. So this is what is component why we use it, because of the modularity factor. And another thing is how we can create our own component, how, what is props, and how we are going to use that props in our project. This is the thing. So I just want to, so you can just use this way. Another way is some people don't like this structure. So if you are learn JavaScript, then you can think of it, there was a thing known as destructuring. So you can destructure that array. So if props is an array, I can destructure it. So what I can do, I don't use props here, I am just using name and age. Okay, and what I'm going to do, I'm just delete. I don't need to use this props dot name, props dot age, because it's annoying sometimes. You can just do that, that works also fine. This is you can, this is also a perfectly valid syntax. Now when to use where, which one. So if you don't know the number of props that you are going to use in a component, then you can use that props. So you don't need to just go here and each time you need to define that. And if you know that what are the amount of props that I'm going to use, like here I know that I just need two things, like name and age, that needs to be variable. So I just define that and destructure that. Okay, another thing is some people don't like this structure, this function syntax. So if you are using React, so in React we are always using ES6 syntax. So if you are going to start in JavaScript, in JavaScript we have higher order function or fat arrow function. So actually they don't use this syntax. So how they are going to use it? So we are just converting this to a arrow function. If you learn about fat arrow function, you can do that. If you don't know about that, you can just you can use that function syntax also. So if you know the fat arrow syntax, then you can define that. Okay, a better way, I think. I'm just going to comment it and just write the same thing into the arrow function. Because why I'm going to do that? Because most of the reactives that are going, you can find, they are writing this fat arrow syntax. So they are defining things like const. So I'm basically defining it like a variable const name, and after that there was a bracket, and then there was a fat arrow syntax. You can do that like a return, and inside that return I have things like this. Okay, and here the props is not defined, so I have to so here I am using that prop, so here also I have to define the name and age props. So now this is also perfectly works fine. You can do that also. So most of the React devs, they are going to use this syntax, and if you want to just get rid of this return also, so you can also do that. What you just need to do for that is delete this bracket and use this bracket instead of that. So this also works perfectly fine. So this is another way to write a component. Most of the times, if you know the arrow function syntax, just try to write that like that. And if you feel comfortable to writing the component like that, you can do that, whatever you prefer. So that's it. So that's what I am. So another thing I want to just mention that React is using something like a Babel. So if you are using Node.js, learn Node.js, you can find that most of the time when people are writing Node.js code, they are using like something like const. If they are writing this same line, they are writing like const React is equal to require React. But in React, we are just using that import statement. So this is basically because of ES6. So in ES6, that is the newer JavaScript. So many browsers don't support ES6. So, but how React does that? In React uses something known as a Babel. You can search for that Babel. And what Babel does, that all the browsers don't support import statement. All the browsers don't support that arrow function syntax. They are older browsers that are available. And when you want to build a website, you don't want to build a website that works only in Chrome. You want to build a website that works on any of the browser that is going to be available, and for that you need to write your code into older version of JavaScript. So for that, what React does, it uses something known as a babel. It works like a compiler. It converts all your new ES6 JavaScript to the older version of JavaScript. So you don't need to think about that this import statement and stuff. When you write that, when React is going to compile that code, it will simply convert this syntax into an older version of React. So you don't need to think about that. So that's it, guys. So this is the thing that I want to teach you today, and from tomorrow I guess you are going to learn about states in React. So
Thank you so much, Devjit. That was really informative. So there are a couple of questions that I noted down while you were teaching. So
okay,
are you ready? Like,
yes,
can I
yes,
ask them?
yes.
Okay. Okay, so the first question, it's not actually a question. Someone wanted you to explain the concept of JSONs. It was asked by Aditya.
Okay, 1 second.
In the meantime, if anyone else has any questions, you can drop it in the chat or you can raise your hand if you wish to unmute. Yes, Devjit.
1 second. I don't find the question step. Okay, so in JSON is simply a file format. So if you go into, so there are different file formats that we are going to use in your everyday development. That is, one is a JSON, there was XML, and then we have things like readme.md structure. So JSON is one of basically a file format. If you can simply think of it like a JavaScript object. So if you know about JavaScript object, it's similar to that. And when you started learning JavaScript, most of the times what you are going to do, you are taking JSONs and you are just converting that JSON into JavaScript object, or when you send the JavaScript object to the backend, you are just converting that JavaScript object to a JSON format. Now, where they are going to use, they are mainly used most of the time that from what I have experienced, most of the time they are going to be used in API calls. So if you are using an API and you want to call that API, and when you get the data from that API, most of the times, I not say every time, most of the times the data that you get from an API, that is in the JSON format. And most API providers also provide you into the JSON format. And why you use that? Because it's easy to handle. So you can just convert into a JavaScript object and do whatever logical operation you can do. So that is about JSON.
Thank you, Devjit. Aditya has a follow-up question. What is ES6 or simply
Okay.
ES?
So this is something you can find confusing, that JavaScript developers sometimes use things like ES6, ES5, and what is this? So what happens? There is a basic history part. So when JavaScript was mainly come for writing logics in the front end of the browser. Now what happens that at first there was a Netscape, there was a company named Netscape, and that time Netscape was in its boom. It has its own browser. So what happens that Netscape writes is JavaScript, and following them, other browser like Chrome, and at that time whatever the provider like Internet Explorer, they are creating their own JavaScript. In case in JavaScript there was the most problem is that if you are a web developer, you are writing your JavaScript, and if that is happening, that if JavaScript is going to work in Chrome and the JavaScript is not going to work in Edge, you don't want that, right? You want your code to be rendered in any of the browser. So what happens that there was a European Council that is known as ICMA. What they're going to do, they are create a standardization. So if you learned C earlier, you heard something about ANSI. So ANSI is basically standardized. ANSI creates a standardization that what is like a variable in JavaScript. So ICMA is creating a standardization for JavaScript, and that is why each time that sometimes JavaScript is also called as ECMAScript. And this ES6 and ES5 thing is basically the versions of JavaScript that is going to. So there was, I guess, ES 2015 that is known as ES6. It is simply a update. Some of the new features come in JavaScript for developers. That is simply, and this is one of the biggest update. ES5 and ES6 they are simply the biggest update in JavaScript language. So like the update you get in your phone or for your apps is simply the update of language. You can think of.
Wonderfully explained, Devjit. So easy to understand. Thank you. So the next question is from Shovik. He is asking, is props a reserved keyword in JavaScript or is it defined somewhere?
Okay, so when there was a live, so at first when I am telling about the difference between like props, the difference between frameworks and libraries. So what happens when you are, so like think about it like a sqrt function. So whatever the parameters are you going to pass in sqrt, so for square rooting, they are fixed, so you cannot pass like a string into a square root. You have to pass a number. Okay, just like that. So when you are writing, so in when React is created, so there are some of the keywords that React is going to use. So props is not a keyword, you can say, until and unless you are using it into a plain HTML. But when are you are using into a curly braces and you are defining simply the props into the bracket, when you are defining basically in the parameter function called parameter, then it's a reserved keyword. So you cannot do anything with whatever you want. You cannot do that with that.
Okay, Devjit. He also has a follow-up question. He's asking how to write arrow in VS Code for JavaScript.
Arrow means the arrow functions.
Shovik, could you clarify what do you mean by arrow in the chat?
Actually,
Okay,
I
maybe
don't see all the questions here.
you can open the chat box. I guess you can stop sharing. Devjit. You can stop sharing and click on the
Okay.
chat box, so you'll
Yes,
be able.
I actually asked about the array function and the yes. How to write the arrow in
function.
yes in
Okay.
VS Code for JavaScript.
Okay. So it's not, so first thing is that the arrow function is not a thing like only for JavaScript. You can write arrow functions in any places. So it's not in VS Code. You can write arrow functions in any of your editor of your choice. You can write it in Atom. You can write it. So it is not like in VS Code. So if you want to see, like I show you how to write an arrow function. So it's not in. I'm just want to show you like the components. I am just going to create a component known as, so this is not a component. I'm just creating a JavaScript file. So arrow.js. That's why I'm going to write in the small case. So how we can write an arrow function? So it's very simple. So if you are writing things like another thing, are you know about arrow functions and what is arrow function is?
Yes, I've learned the syntax from
Okay,
Geeks for Geeks. Yes, but what is the keyword for writing this? I mean, what do you type in the keyboard to write the arrow?
Okay, so this is simple, like const arrow. If I'm doing that, then after equal, you have to give the first bracket, and after that, I am doing equal and then the arrow. So basically it looks different because I have done some customization in my VS Code. That's why it shows like that. Okay. So you have to just equal and then you have to use the greater than sign.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Devjit. So the next question is from Sarthak. He is asking, is JSON equal to JavaScript object orientation?
No. JSON is a different file format. So what is, so like you can compare also JSON if you are writing Python, you can compare it to also its dictionary, because the same key. JSON is simply a file format which uses key value pair. And JavaScript object is also using key value pair, but the difference is basically when you are defining the JSON, you get the key value pair, and another thing is that you can find the double quotes each and every place. So the keys are also all in double quotes. So we are just it not same as JavaScript object. You are just, if you just go to if you are using any APIs, or if you are just creating a JSON file, and if you are just directly going to try to manipulate that file, you cannot, most of the time you cannot do that. You have to first convert. There was a function known as json.stringify and json.parse. These two functions are used to create from JSON to JavaScript object and JavaScript object to JSON. We just need to use these functions and first convert the JSON into JavaScript object, do all the operations, then after that we're doing all that operation. Okay, so they are not same.
Okay, Devjit, he's asked a follow-up question. He's asking, is JSON simply arrays in an object?
You can say that also, but it's not mandatory to be an array. There also be a single object, and so if
And
you,
it can also be a key value pair, right?
yes,
It
yes,
can
yes,
be in
it's
both
it's,
ways.
it's the simple, the most important thing in JSON is it's a key value pair.
Correct. Okay, so this Saksham faced some error while doing npm and npx. Saksham, can you come off mute and explain the error to Devjit so that he can try to help you?
When I write the code npm, I create React app.
Hmm.
It shows a lot of errors.
So which system are you using currently right now? Windows?
Windows.
Okay. So in Windows there was sometimes there was a problem. So what I suggest you that you just check out one thing. That install create React app in global. So how you can do that? You can turn on the PowerShell or command prompt, whatever you have. You just open as administrator and then run that command npm done I create React app. There was I think that in Windows there were maybe some of the errors, because I really don't like Windows app for that reason, because the installations are very complex rather in compared to Linux or Mac. So there are some of the errors you can find. So the best thing is try to install, because what happens when we are using that npm I and whatever the package name we are installing, it just install into our local project. But we don't want that. I want just to write that command one time, that npm I create React app, and after that whenever I'm using like npx create React app and then the app name, it will simply create my boilerplate code. For that, what you have to do, you have to install that create React app globally in your system. And for that, in Windows, I guess it's open. You have to open the terminal administrator, and then you have to run the command.
I hope, Saksham, that helps. You can try out what Devjit suggested. If not, if you still have doubts, we can provide his contact to you. You can ask him directly as well. Right, Devjit? That's
Sure,
fine.
sure, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So the next question is that from Aditya. So Aditya, no, Devjit is not going to be with us tomorrow. So Devjit, can you maybe in 2 lines tell him what DOM manipulation is all about?
Okay, DOM manipulation is basically document object model. So you can think of HTML as a JavaScript. So what is HTML? HTML is like you are creating your house. So when you are started creating your home, so DOM manipulation is basically adding logic in your code. So in HTML and CSS, we don't write logic. Java's DOM manipulation is simply, so like if you want, think of it like you can change. You want this background. Uh, when I ever click any button, you want to change that background color. So for that, what I have to do, I have to select that thing. So what I do in the first of React, I document.get element by ID. So I am basically defining one div and give some height and width of it, and then I am declaring an ID. And DOM manipulation is basically, there is a tree. It is known as a DOM tree. You search for like DOM tree. Uh, you can find there was a like this. This is a tree. So whenever we create any project, any HTML, so there was a document that is the main what you can say a global, and then within that you have HTML, and then it has some child element. This is simply whatever we write in basic HTML. It is simply the tabular or tree design of that. The how we manipulate this, like if you want to change the color of this H1 using JavaScript, how you can do that? You have to write JavaScript selecting that H1 and change the color of it. This is like a DOM manipulation. Basically, we are manipulating this tree.
Thanks for that explanation, Devjit. Last question for today, I guess, that I can see in the chat. Vedansh is asking, can we export the React code to create a desktop app?
I guess React has support for desktop app. I don't know. Yes, but one thing that right now they are using React View. All the things are, there's a PWA, it is a progressive web app. So if you search about the progressive web app, they are one of the best thing right now. Twitter is having that progressive web app thing. So what you can do, you can like go to their website, and then there was at the top there was a download icon. If you click on that, it will install that app into your desktop or desktop, mobile, whatever device you want, as a normal app. But the advantage of that app is the app is much lighter, so it uses less RAM. So if you are learning something in program PWA, if you learn React, then it's not very hard to create PWAs. You just need to do some of the things to change it into PWA. If you're just going to build a PWA, it will work on your mobile device as an app, work on your desktop device. Yes, that is not a native app as in your system, but it works like an app. So you have the logo in your apps, you can click on that and this app is going to open also. And for mobile apps, you can use something like a React Native. I really don't know about the desktop app support for React. Support of that.
I hope, Vedansh, that somewhat clarifies your doubt. Devjit has tried to answer it to the best of his knowledge. Okay, I guess we don't have any more questions. Okay, one last question, Devjit, then we're gonna wind up.
Okay.
Aditya is asking, does he need to learn OOPS in JS for React? Is it a prerequisite?
Okay, so another thing, when you are after the, whatever I teach, you go to reactjs.org and you go and you find their code is not similar to my code, because there was one reason that in React there was you need earlier React is using like object-oriented programming, so they are using things like classes and objects and all the object-oriented concept, and that's very painful to learn and write also. So after that, React is now using functional components. So in React, we can I write component just in one way. That is the functional approach. Whatever I teach today. Another approach is class-based approach. But class-based approach don't now companies are not going to do that class-based approach. They are using functional approach. So if you don't learn OOPS, that's fine. Don't there no problem on that. But if you see others code in React, like there, if you have some error in you see on Stack Overflow, there may be some of the codes. This is a legacy code which are written in class, so you may find some of the difficulties. But for starting and building your own project, you don't find any difficulties in functional component. So you don't need to learn OOPS right now. You can do that. Obviously, you have to learn that, but after some time, you can do that.
Thank you, Devjit. That brings us to the end of the Q&A. Joe, would you like to conclude the session?
Okay, one thing I just want to say that if you guys have any difficulties later, then you can contact me. There was a link, my LinkedIn and Twitter profile, so you can search on Devik Mullik and you can find me. You can ask me all of your questions there also.
Yes, Devjit, we're going to share the material with them after the session is over, so
Okay,
they can
sure.
contact you if they need any help.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful session, Devjit. Really informative. I know it was just 1 hour, but you covered a lot of important topics.
Yeah,
So
definitely. I agree. That was a really good session. Thank you so much. Guys, we hope you enjoyed everything and you'll join us again tomorrow where we dive deeper into React. And don't forget, if you'd like to learn more about Codecademy blockchain, you can reach out to me directly. I think we put the link for the Codecademy chapter in, and I'll give you my LinkedIn as well. Just give me a second. Otherwise, it was fantastic to have you guys, and we hope you learned a lot about React.
Also, while Jo sends her details, I would like to remind you all we have Lorenzo coming in tomorrow to take the session. He is one of the chapter leads of Finland. So he is a developer himself and he has been a professional. So do be sure to join us tomorrow because his session is going to be as amazing as Devjit's was. So see you all tomorrow at 6. Over to you, Joe.